right, well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the Wallace-Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts, which we like to call the Wallace. My name is Mark Slavkin. I'm Director of Education here at the Wallace, and it's my pleasure to welcome those of you who are with us this morning, some great allies and advocates for American for the Arts, as well as those of us who are joining us online through the video live stream. We at the Wallace are honored to join with American for the Arts to help kick off National Arts and Education Week, which every week should be Arts Education Week, but this is a particular week to celebrate amazing work happening all around the country in arts education. And I just want to start by acknowledging the vital leadership role that American for the Arts plays in championing arts education, both in local communities and in Washington, particularly with our Congress. So in spite of all the challenges facing our country, support for the arts is pretty solid as a bipartisan issue in Washington for arts and arts education. And American for the Arts deserves tremendous credit for the sustained, thoughtful, creative advocacy that helps make that possible. So we were really delighted when American for the Arts reached out if we could help host this morning's event as part of the kickoff for National Arts in Education Week. And I want to thank all of you for being here. Just a bit about the Wallace, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in Los Angeles more generally. The Wallace is a new performing arts center. We turn 5 years old next month, so we'll be entering kindergarten for performing arts centers very soon. We're thrilled to present amazing work in music and dance and theater and film, but also have a really robust commitment to arts education and arts learning, both for young people, kids who come here throughout the school year to see performances, but also programs for adults to engage people in the arts, particularly those whose voices are often not heard or whose stories are overlooked. And so that's a critical part of our mission here at the Wallace. I want to just step back now for a few minutes and just mention or paint a picture of what's happening in Los Angeles overall over maybe the last 20 years or so. I'm not going to go year by year, but in very broad brush to share some of the themes that may be relevant for people outside of Los Angeles to apply in their own community setting. LA County, as many of you may know, if it were a state, would be the 8th largest state in the United States, with 81 school districts and over 1.6 million students in K-12 schools. So tackling arts education in LA is akin to taking on an entire state. And in the late 90s, or by the late 90s, we had become too used to the idea of arts being scattershot and being kind of luck-based, that if you were fortunate as a child to be in the right school in the right year in the right classroom, you might have access to some wonderful experiences, but by no means was it embedded in a systemic way for all students. But that became normal for us. In California in years following a state ballot measure that cut funding in terms of local property taxes. Schools suffered, lots of entities suffered, the arts suffered, and I think we became too accepting of that that's sort of the best we can do. And thankfully, in the late 90s, with leadership from LA Unified School District, the largest in our county, from school board members and superintendents, but also from the Board of Supervisors at the county level, the County Arts Commission, the County Office of Education, arts and cultural organizations throughout the county, recommitted to take a new look at this through the lens of fairness and equity, and recognizing that we would never accept in another school discipline, say math, that we don't really do math at our school. We used to, but the math teacher retired. But one of our parent fathers is an accountant, and he comes once a year and talks to the kids about numbers, and they really love that, and that's our math program. That would be an outrage, right? That would be on 60 Minutes, but we had gotten used to that in the arts. And the good news is when confronted with that, educators, school board members, superintendents said, you're right. We're not doing right by our kids. It's not fair. It's not equitable. We can do better. We will do better. And so the journey over 20 years has been incremental. It's not magic overnight. We still have a long way to go. But we now have 65 school boards out of the 82 have taken formal actions to adopt a policy, to develop a plan, to expand budget resources, to elevate and lift the status of arts education across this incredibly diverse county. So it is now the new normal that all schools are offering one or more arts disciplines. Several schools are doing much better than that. We're still inconsistent, but the new lens is a systemic lens, and the new goal is a goal for all kids. Not sufficient to have one award-winning band here or one special focused arts high school there. This needs to be for everybody. And it turns out school districts know how to do that, that's how leadership occurs for all the other school disciplines. It's about resources, it's about professional development, it's about classroom support, it's about principal leadership, it's about dedicated funding. Not really different than other school subjects, but we had to recommit ourselves to the arts. So I'm incredibly proud of the progress that's been made, and just want to hit a couple of the themes really quickly. Excuse me. So these are some of the lessons learned, that may be useful to other people. Part of this paradigm shift was to see school districts as the unit of change. That may seem obvious, but until the late 90s, many of us working in the field were thinking of individual schools as a unit of change. And if we could work with a given faculty, a given principal, a given grade level, and help them expand their music program or develop a visual art program, whatever it was, that's the nature of the work. And it struck me and others that that's about a 10,000-year strategy if we're working one school at a time to reach all kids in a county as vast as LA. So embracing the idea that this is school district work, which means school boards and superintendents, again, that's become sort of obvious, but that was a novel idea. And I think it remains a central building block for advocacy for arts education is to work in that way. The work is both top-down and bottom-up. That school district support, adopting a policy, developing a strategic plan for the arts, allocating budget resources, absolutely essential, but not sufficient. If you have a third-grade teacher who doesn't feel comfortable in the arts, the fact that the school district voted last night does not change his or her sense of confidence and knowledge to be able to teach the arts or integrate the arts. So teachers need support, professional development, modeling, coaching, partnerships to help them become more comfortable in teaching the arts. We have a generation of teachers who grew up in California in the dark days and don't have it in their life experience to see what quality arts education can look like. So top down and bottom up. And somewhere in the middle are school district leaders and principals. Their leadership is vital, but many of them don't have personal experience in the arts, feel uncomfortable in their lack of expertise, and aren't really ready to lead when they don't have a clear sense in their own mind about what this is supposed to look like. What does quality look like in a band room, in a dance studio, on stage, in a theater? So we can't leave out principals and school district leadership in giving them professional development and support and guidance and coaching. So it's top down, it's bottom up, but the school district as a whole has to be the unit of change. The goal needs to be every student, not a few students. Another lesson learned for all of us is to let go of do a little bit. That's not sufficient, and we'll never get to all kids through that model. So philanthropic support is always important, but it needs to be in service of leveraging public funds, matching funds, challenge grants, that sort of thing. Not we'll give it to you for free, you don't have to expend money. That's not an acceptable model. So letting go of the charity model was an important step for us. Sustained local advocacy, that many of us working around the county are concerned about the larger picture, but we don't all live in Long Beach or Pomona or West Covina or Lancaster or Antelope Valley. Schooling and school districts are a very local affair, and the people whose voices matter most are those who live in that community and have that credibility as parents, teachers, business leaders, civic leaders, whoever they may be. So the investment in cultivating that local leadership and providing training for local advocates to let them learn how to be most effective is key, because the school boards who signed on to these initiatives and the superintendents who signed on to these initiatives, it turns out, are gone with the blink of an eye. There's incredible turnover and turbulence within school districts. We're always kind of starting over. So local advocates in those communities to be at those school board meetings constantly, bringing new leaders on board and helping them understand why arts matter in that community is key. And then the last lesson learned for now is the idea that all means all. And we're still not there yet. We use the word all kids, every child a lot. That rolls off the tongue. But do we really mean it? And are we willing to tolerate gross inequities, particularly for those kids who need it the most, kids living in poverty, kids living in a world where school is a struggle. They don't feel validated. They don't feel their voices matter. Those kids are crying out, whether they know it or not, for the way that arts can help transform their lives. And yet we haven't seen the arts as part of a solution for the neediest kids. We've treated it as what I call instructional dessert for very advanced and proficient kids who are doing just fine, thank you, in math and English and history and everything else. And they're also in the theater program. They're also in the band. They're also in dance. That's lovely. We want those kids to have it. But those kids who need it the most aren't getting it because it's seen as a luxury or a distraction, or it's not what they need right now because they're struggling to learn language, they're struggling to build confidence, they're struggling to engage in school. And it's like, hello, maybe the arts are part of that solution for all kids. So all means all, and we need to raise our voices and be less tolerant of the inequities. And then in closing, two key challenges that we face and I think others face. Number one, cultural relevance. The curriculum for arts education is largely a middle-class white person's affair, drawn from celebration of art forms and artists who come from Western Europe. All of that is wonderful, but that doesn't reflect the kids who are in school today, particularly in LA County, where Latino students make up the largest number, but so do kids from every other part of the world. Why aren't their cultures celebrated? Why aren't their art forms recognized as real art forms? Why are they marginalized as world music that we do once in a while rather than music? Who said? Who decides what's world music? And why is American music just music? Those things might seem unimportant or trivial, but from the kids' point of view, I think they're really important. Is this for me? Do they care about my stories, my culture, my family, my heritage? We need to do a much, much better job of making arts learning relevant for all kids, and not just one day a year. It's African American History Month, or it's Cinco de Mayo, or whatever it might be. It needs to be all the time, and that means reinventing the idea of whose art counts, what quality is in terms of traditional or classical models versus other art forms. But that needs to become the new norm. And then lastly, funding matters. We've done a lot in LA County without a huge influx of new funding, and that's great, and that's to be celebrated. But we're not going to reach the goals we have until we learn that you get what you pay for. Some other states have learned that. You get what you pay for. So we need to fund schools at a higher level if we want all these things for our kids. California is not yet learned that. We want world-class schools. We're not yet willing to pay for it. And we're going to get a little bit stuck at all the progress we can make if we don't get over that hump and fund our schools at a higher level. Most of the things we are talking about cost money. And without money, you can only go so far. So we can't separate the fate of the art from the fate of school funding overall. So I'll stop there. I hope that's useful. That's a very condensed version, but it defines the nature of the work that's been happening in LA. And in spite of the challenges, I'm really optimistic about where we've come and where we can still go because people value it. This is not an us-them argument. This is all of us wanting what's best for kids. And the debate is really, how are we going to exactly pay for it? How are we going to implement it? That's a much better debate than is it worth doing. I think we live in a community in LA and LA County where we believe it's worth doing, and now it's the hard part of actually achieving it. But with the support of many of our colleagues who are in this room and many watching, we will get this done. I'm confident. And the Wallace is pleased to be a partner in that effort. So with that, let me now turn it over to my friend and colleague from American for the Arts. Jeff Poland is the national arts education lead for Americans for the Arts. So he lives a large part of his life on airplanes, but is an incredibly dedicated advocate who will go to Alabama and then Alaska and then Michigan and then Boston and then Texas and then Oklahoma to be present, to inspire local leadership, to join and partner with local efforts around the country. And we're blessed that Americans for the Arts has invested in him and his leadership, and we're blessed that he's taken time to come from Alaska to San Diego to LA, I think, in the last 3 days to be with us this morning. So join me in welcoming and thanking Jeff for his leadership.
Thank you so much, Mark, for those kind words, and thank you to the Wallace for having us here for National Arts in Education Week. Good morning to all of you here and all of our friends joining from the West Coast. Good afternoon for all of our friends tuning in from the East Coast, and good, lunchtime for those folks in between. My name is Jeff Poulin. I'm the Arts Education Program Manager for Americans for the Arts, and it is such a pleasure to be speaking with you all here today, this second day and national kickoff event for National Arts in Education Week. Americans for the Arts is the leading organization for the advancement of the arts and arts education here in the United States, and I'm speaking with you today as part of our effort to lead the nation and unify the voices of all arts education supporters with a resounding boom in celebration for National Arts in Education Week 2018. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you again for the Los Angeles community for welcoming us here to kick off the week. Designated by Congress in 2010, Congressional Resolution 275 names the week that begins the second Sunday of September as National Arts in Education Week, or the national celebration of the transformative power of the arts in education. Whether a parent or a student or an educator, business leader, philanthropist, or elected official, we are joining together with some 750 plus celebrations happening across this country to raise our voices in support of arts education. Celebrations are happening in every pocket of this country. Earlier this weekend, the community of Fairbanks, Alaska joined together with leaders from their local Fairbanks Arts Alliance and welcomed the Alaska State Council of the Arts to town, and Americans for the Arts was pleased to join them and celebrate Arts Ed Week during a block party and art walk. We all explored the theme, How Are You Creative?, honoring art and cultures and people, from civic leaders to culture bearers, educators to families, who transform and are transformed through the arts in Alaska's interior. Just yesterday in sunny San Diego, the new Children's Museum was abuzz with people and families and educational and community leaders celebrating their achievements in increasing access to arts learning opportunities through school district leadership and county-wide creative youth development networking programs. In Missoula, Montana, Spark Arts Ignite Learning is bringing arts education programming to literally every community event happening throughout Missoula this week, from the baseball game to the programming at the Native American Center. And in the state of Ohio this week, they will reveal the Ohio Arts Education Data Project, envisioning how they approach state longitudinal data systems, showcasing new information about arts access and participation in their K-12 system. And this Friday in Boston, the Arts for All Coalition, a group of statewide arts education programs focused on gathering stakeholders to raise a mocktail in support of students and new public policies supportive of arts learning throughout their Commonwealth. And in Spartanburg, South Carolina, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and throughout the state of North Carolina, arts education advocates are celebrating the proclamations signed by their elected officials, designating this week Arts Education Week in their communities and in their states. So the celebration nationwide is larger than ever, more vibrant than years past, and more inclusive of voices in support of arts education than we've ever seen before. So congratulations to the field in bringing our voices together to celebrate arts education this week. This is because in 2018, we have tons to celebrate. Almost 3 years ago, in December 2015, Americans from across the country applauded our leaders in Congress and the White House for reforming our federal education policies and bringing forth the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. This bill codified about a dozen or so arts-friendly provisions and reaffirmed the central role that the arts play as part of a well-rounded education for all learners, like Mark was talking about, all. especially those students who are traditionally left out of their access to arts education because of their race, because of their socioeconomic status, or because of their zip code. It's because of advocacy from arts education supporters like you here in this room and around the country that we saw the popular opinion that 9 out of 10 Americans believe that the arts are essential to a well-rounded education. We saw that become law. As of 2018, it's safe to say that nearly all Americans believe that the arts are part of a well-rounded education and should be taught in K-12 schools as well as in their community. This data will actually be revealed later this month as part of the Americans Speak Out About the Arts in 2018 public opinion poll. And a little sneak peek, you'll be able to check it out at americansforthearts.org with downloadable and shareable infographics and stuff. However, our work isn't done, and we can't become complacent with our previous successes. Just because we have raving opinion polls or we have new laws in place at the federal level, we can't be done. In Washington, we've faced unusual challenges since 2016, including calls from our country's leaders to defund the infrastructure that supports arts education through the National Endowment for the Arts and the U.S. Department of Education. Yet, our very arts-friendly Congress has rebuffed these calls for elimination and spoken out for the arts by increasing both funding agencies, supporting more arts learning throughout America. Thank you for your advocacy, thank you to our elected officials in Congress, and thank you to all of those who have allowed these opportunities to continue to become reality. And that is because for decades, research has shown the transformative power of the arts in schools and in communities, and its benefits for all young people. It's absolutely clear. When learning in and through the arts, young people succeed in school, in work, and in life. However, decades-long longitudinal studies indicate that access to arts learning opportunities is not equitable, primarily for specific populations like young people of color, students with disabilities, those who are classified as low socioeconomic status, or those living in our rural communities. The fact is, that same research reveals that those marginalized groups of young people, the arts learning, particularly during this national celebration, improve equity and access, and ultimately close this opportunity gap. We at Americans for the Arts believe that action is needed and advocacy towards cultural equity and racial justice is essential. Like ESSA's arts-friendly provisions, it's also important for us to understand that there is new capacity for leadership at the state and local level. The new laws also decentralize our educational decision-making, shifting much of the power to states and local education leaders. Studies have shown that to truly move our educational system to become more equitable, we must have a diversity of voices at the table. I say that we should get more diverse arts education leaders at every table for every decision impacting arts education from here on out. You all with me? So for this Arts Education Week, Americans for the Arts and over 750 partners across the country will be celebrating in a new way. We are reaffirming our commitment to public support for arts education and with a renewed focus on empowering diverse leadership across the country, in every state, in every community, from coast to coast. It's our belief that we must work towards systemic goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion to ensure that decision makers not only reflect the youth populations in which they're serving, but also implement the educational opportunities provided through the federal law and the funding coming down through state departments of education in ways that work towards strong and equitable arts education policies. Whether celebrating on the streets of Fairbanks, in city halls in Spartanburg or Philly, or across the great state of Ohio, we have to know that our educational decision-making is going to be impacting arts education. And I know in those places that the arts and cultural and education leaders are taking note because of the grassroots efforts from all of you. So please keep it up. So what do we do next? This week, I encourage you to take action. Lend your passion and expertise to help inform what's happening in your community and in your state, and keep the arts at the center of a well-rounded education. The time is now. During this national celebration, from today until next Sunday, I have 3 asks for you. The first, celebrate. Check, we're doing that here right now by logging into this webcast or being here in person today. We have over 750 communities across this country that are hosting celebrations. Go to one and join your fellow arts education supporters. 2, advocate. Be sure to get in touch with the decision maker today and let them know about the transformative power of the arts in education from your perspective. Whether a principal, school board member, civic leader, or legislator, today is the time to send them a note, invite them to your next performance, or encourage them to pass a resolution. And 3, participate. In honor of National Arts and Education Week, we'll be collectively telling our story on social media. Whether using Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, be sure to tell the story about arts education impacting your life. Use hashtag #BecauseOfArtsEd to tell your story and hashtag ArtsEdWeek to contribute to the national dialogue. Be sure to visit www.nationalartsandeducationweek.org for all of this information and much more. So, for all of you here and all of you tuning in online, thank you so much for having me and for being a part of National Arts and Education Week. This effort will elevate arts education and discuss the positive impact on our young people, on our communities, and on our nation. Thank you. Next up, I am pleased to welcome to the microphone a real champion for arts education here in Los Angeles County, bringing our focus to youth voice. Please welcome to the podium Mila Kuna, the Youth Poet Laureate of the West Coast, who is a recent high school graduate and fierce advocate for arts education.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Mila Kuda, and I'm going to be doing a poem for you. This is a poem that I wrote 2 years ago in collaboration with a program called Activate, and this is a program that fuses activism and arts education, and basically a group of poets would meet every single Saturday and talk about how we feel we can use our voices to inspire activism, but also using our art in order to do that. So there was a short film that was made out of this poem, and you can find the film online at California Alliance for the Arts, I believe, and also part of LAUSD Spotlight Arts on PBS. And the poem is called "There Is a Student Named Art." Her guitar strings and gave her a seat in the back of the classroom. Without her, we are all separate islands, floating at sea by ourselves, alone in crowded hallways. Without her, we have no life rafts, bridges, anchors. We chew on our pencils, look out the window, stare at the clock. There is a student named Art in every classroom across the nation, and when we give her her voice back, we start to listen. She dresses in primary colors and smiles at strangers during passing period. The songs they play, Art plays the piccolo in her best friend's folk band. The songs they play don't have much rhythm, but still get everyone dancing. Her mouth is a garden that does not whisper thorns to anyone. She'd rather plant seeds in the palms of their hands, promises that they will blossom no matter their roots. Art doesn't understand math because of its solid and straight lines. She can't fathom there being only one answer to anything. So she sketches her own equations. Poetry plus passion equals peace. She subtracts subjectivity from logic, finds that there is so much comfort in creation, beauty in becoming the person people want to sit next to at lunchtime. Art includes everyone in the conversation. Her messages are murals on barren brick walls, hoping all who stop stare will take a up at 6 and took 2 buses to get here, just to hear her speak and sparkle, just to learn her lesson for today. But if we close down her theaters, plunder her paint, deactivate her microphone, and unplug her voice, school becomes a silence that is perfectly intact. No one wants to be the person to break it. There is a student named Art in your district, your school, your classroom. She can be the click of comprehension the moment you master the concept, as long as we give her the chance. Today, she writes of the world she would like to see tomorrow, a world that is colorful and warm, the perfect weather for anyone to bloom. Thank you.
Wow, that was fantastic. Thank you. Our next speaker I first met when she was teaching a group of aspiring young dancers in Oklahoma City. We then continued our friendship on the steps of Capitol Hill as she advocated for the arts and arts education.
Good morning, everyone, and afternoon on the live stream. I'm honored to be here today with all of you in this beautiful building designed, built, and paid for by artists and dreamers. My formative years growing up in South Texas were spent in public school education with limited resources for the arts. However, what my school was able to provide changed my life. I saw my first musical at the age of 12. My dad took me to a local theater to see a chorus line. You know the one. It was then I knew a profession in the performing arts was my destiny. I told my dad, I want to do that. And at that age, I was already studying ballet, tap, and jazz at a local dance school. When I learned a chorus line required the skills of singing and acting along with dancing, my mother suggested I join the choir instead of the high school band, and I really wanted to play the quad drums. It's still not too late. I knew to be able one day to perform in a chorus line, I had to be equally strong in dancing, acting, and singing. I had to be a triple threat. Joining my public school's choir program enhanced not only my skills to be the working actor you see today, it also changed me as a person. Joining that choir taught me how to be a better, well-rounded human being. I learned teamwork. I learned respect. I learned empathy. I learned how to be a better person to my fellow classmates. I learned to err is to be human. I learned to fail. I learned to go after my wildest dreams. I also learned that to be an accomplished artist required skills in my other studies like math, science, history. The importance of arts education cannot be overstated. I have experienced firsthand what arts education can do not only for artists, but for students of all walks of life, from the blighted to the serene, from the math whiz to the musical savant, from the overly clumsy to the perfectly poised. I have taught dance classes for groups ranging from trust fund babies to inner city schools, from housing authority communities to universities specializing in performing arts, and I can assure you that I witnessed a change in all of these students' attitudes about life and about themselves when they walked out of my classroom. That is the power of the arts. It's not a power any single person can claim or wield. It's a power the community bestows or withholds at its own discretion and peril. The arts are not just for traditional artists either. Music is full of math, but so is architecture. This room was originally built as the mail sorting room, this room right here, of the Beverly Hills Post Office about 90 years ago. And it still stands today because artists. Artists decided to make it attractive, decided to build it well, decided creativity and art means something, project managers, and are worth something, finance managers. Artists decided not to tear it down when it was no longer useful for its original purpose, and artists repurposed it for the arts. I get really passionate about that part. Last year, while speaking on Capitol Hill, I reached out on social media asking to share how arts education has influenced their lives. The countless personal stories shared left me speechless and overwhelmed. These real-life stories came not just from people in the arts profession, they came from people who were affected by arts education to pursue their professions in medicine, law, politics, science, engineering, and education, to name a few. Not only did arts education help them achieve the career of their dreams, it helped them survive. I received stories about self-discovery, self-esteem, dealing with parents' divorce, overcoming disabilities, finding a common ground with an enemy, claiming self-worth for the first time, witnessing their veteran grandfather work through their PTSD with arts therapy, coping with the loss of a loved one, choosing to live instead of taking their own life. These are but a few stories shared with me that day. I would like to share with you now one of the stories I received on social media. Michelle, right, but on the stage. I have met my very best friends through the arts. My life is fuller and richer because I learned how to embrace everyone's talent as well as my own. Arts education made me the woman I am today without a doubt. Michelle Chernikoff is a communication specialist for the National Forensic Science Technology Center and lives in Florida with her husband. They're expecting their first child this October. What I learned from my friends, family, and fans is that we are all the same. We have all been affected by arts education, including all of us in this incredible space. That is why I stand here with you today. Together, we can bring attention to arts education. Together, we can work with decision makers from across the country, here in Los Angeles, and all across this great nation. Together, we can ensure that we as a community and nation are supporting our students, our communities, and ourselves by not withholding arts from the next generation. It is our responsibility and duty and pleasure to give to the future generations what was given to us, a chance to live our lives to the fullest, a chance not to just dream, but to accomplish our wildest dreams, a chance to change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. That's an incredible message to bring to this event. As we always do at Americans for the Arts, working to connect the federal to state to local pipeline in terms of developing our policies and developing our advocacy strategy is absolutely essential. So since we're here in Los Angeles, we're going to spend our last little bit of time together in conversation, a little more casual. So I'll invite our two representatives from the LA area, Mark Slavkin from the Wallace, as well as Mila Kuna, our youth poet, to join me over here, and we're going to have a brief conversation about Los Angeles. Thank you, and thank you both again for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom and expertise and art. It's absolutely essential. So, Mark, I want to start with you to talk a little bit about what's happening here in Los Angeles. You gave us some great strategies and some challenges, but I would love to talk about some of the actual programming that's happening that's making a difference in the lives of young people. Can you give us an overview about how that works here at the Wallace and other places that you've seen it really excel here in LA County? I know that there's a ton of good work happening and would love to know some more details.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there's always been a lot going on in LA. I think there's more now, and hopefully we're more connected and more coordinated than in the past, both in school and out of school. In school, districts are hiring more arts teachers, which is fantastic. There's actually a shortage of music teachers. So the headlines used to be about laying off teachers. Now districts are challenged to find more music teachers. There are lots of cultural organizations throughout Southern California working closely with schools to bring teaching artists into the classroom, to engage students and support teachers. We have some colleagues from the LA Music Center here who do an amazing job at doing that. And then work out of school. Here at the Wallace, we work both with schools who come on field trips to see performances here, but we're also blessed with 3 beautiful classrooms that abilities. And it turns out that people with autism are no different than anyone else, have the same passion and talent and dreams that Gabrielle just shared, but are sometimes trapped in a body that makes it hard for that to come out or hard for that to be obvious at first glance. So we're thrilled to be able to create an opportunity for them to learn and grow and advance and become more skilled and more talented, and then share their artistry on stage. And these are young people who are probably more comfortable on stage than they are off stage, that's where they can really thrive. The next step is expanding professional opportunities for artists with disabilities, and what's called authentic casting, which is something that I care a lot about, which is if the show involves someone with autism, why not hire an actor who has autism, not an actor pretending to have autism? And just this week, several of the young people in our program have been cast on a new Netflix show called Atypical, playing young people with autism, which is fantastic. So lots of stuff in school, lots of partnerships in and out of school. And I'll just end with more awareness now of the pipeline. This is something you and I have discussed, how do we prepare people for jobs in the creative economy, which is so vibrant and robust in LA, on stage, off stage, backstage, video game design, costume design, fashion design. All those jobs are here, and yet the diversity of students in school is not yet reflected in the workforce. Not all those kids can imagine a life in those jobs, and not all of us are doing an effective job reaching into schools and creating those partnerships. I think that's the next wave, career pathways, so the arts aren't just nice or not just healing or not just therapeutic, but can prepare kids for a brighter future economically.
Absolutely. That's incredible work, and so important and really just pertinent to what's happening across the country with all sorts of conversations. Mila, I want to turn it over to you. You mentioned in your remarks that you were involved with some advocacy efforts around arts education to make opportunities like what Mark was just talking about a reality for young people. Can you tell us a little bit about what that project was and how you got involved and what you saw as the impact?
So I work sort of in collaboration with a nonprofit called Get Lit, and it stands for Get Literature, Get Lit Words Ignite, and they are the ones who sponsored the Activate program that I mentioned, and it was taught by two teaching artists named Raul Herrera and Gordon Ip, and they rallied a bunch of poets together who were all interested and all part of Get Lit to come together, and they made a curriculum for us that fused activism and art. And the culmination of the entire project was sponsored by the California Arts Alliance. They made a film project where they opened it up to kids from all over America and were like, make a short film about why arts education is important to you, and then submit the film. And so there were so many amazing films that were made, and they're all online for everyone to watch. But at the very end of the contest, basically, the short films were shown to educators and to people in power who could actually, take those messages to heart and use them to impact the curriculums that they're building themselves. So it was really cool to be able to see that, and also it was just so much fun. We covered ourselves in paint, we wrote poems together. It was good for catharsis as well as, I think, the curriculum that resulted from it.
That's fantastic. And again, so important to this ecosystem approach, right? We need a little bit of that, a little bit of this, some connections to the national stuff like we're doing today. It's really, really important. So I know that you also shared with me that you graduated high school. Congratulations, and you're looking towards the future. So hearing a little bit about some of the career pathways that Mark was talking about, that Gabrielle shared, from your own experience as a rather accomplished poet, I would say, how would you approach, this work as an educator for the next generation? What's your advice for the field?
Well, I'm actually really excited because I go to Wellesley College. I'm currently taking this semester off because I wanted to spend time doing things that were really important to me, which were all really basically poetry and doing things like that. And I'm going to be teaching a workshop on Saturdays for young poets. And so I'm excited because I'm going to start teaching myself. But what's really exciting is I know that I've been blessed with amazing teachers, and so I want to take what they have taught me and start to give back to other young poets who need to be listened to. And that's the big thing that I would say, that my advice, if I had to present a poem in front of the class, I wouldn't have done that if not for the teacher who really encouraged me to do it and was like, you know what, you're going to go to this open mic and you're going to kill it. And without her, Kelly Grace Thomas, amazing English teacher, I wouldn't have had any of the opportunities to make these films and to express myself. And so I want to listen to the youth, and I'm honored that I was listened to and still being listened to right now.
No, and you're an incredible voice for this, so thank you. So Mark, here at the Wallace and with other roles that I know that you have throughout Los Angeles and the county and beyond and across the nation as well, what are some of the key aspects that you've observed towards building leadership in folks like Mila or like others that are artists or educators that really tackle some of those challenges that are facing our community that deal with arts education?
Happy to. Want to put a plug in for her video. If you Google Student Voices Campaign, you'll see the video and many other videos created by young people that are really compelling. So congratulations on that. To me, advocacy is sort of everything. And it's all of our jobs. We can't leave it to others. And I think of the students in Parkland, Florida, who became engaged after the horrific shooting to raise their voices and get much smarter about voting, about engaging with elected officials, and recognizing that their voices matter. And in some ways, I think we're living in a climate where the voices of young people have more credibility than the voices of adults. I think there may have been a time where that wasn't true, and the voices of younger people were sort of dismissed, they're naive, et cetera. And now I think there's a passion and a credibility that comes with it that is so essential and so needed. So I think all of us need to be creating opportunities to invest in young people on the advocacy side and see arts and social action as two sides of the same coin and not as a separate issue. We at the Wallace are pleased to partner with the Kennedy Center on the National Arts Summit that the Kennedy Center hosts in Washington, D.C. And as part of that is the idea of recognizing citizen artists. And I really like that phrase. I think we all need to be citizens and artists and recognize that there's a place for just beauty and entertainment and reflection through the arts. But there's also unique power to inspire people or provoke people or mobilize people. So embedding from a young age, high school all the way on, the role of artists as citizen artists and the way that our voices can be shared in a variety of means, I think is really essential. So California Alliance for Arts Education that she mentioned is doing that through Student Voices. Arts for LA, a nonprofit here in LA, is doing that with the Activate program in offering training and support for artists and citizens to advocate in and through the arts. The Kennedy Center Citizen Artist Initiative, I think is really important in that regard. So I think there's growing momentum that we don't need to ask permission to raise our voices, that we need to insist on speaking up and being heard. It starts with young people. I think they're way ahead of us. Now we need to catch up with their passion and their skill and learn from each other.
I agree. I think that young people are often far ahead of us in terms of their work in advocacy for arts education. And we just heard from Gabrielle, who talked about being a working actor. And so I wonder, for those of us who don't live in the entertainment capital of the country, what are the connections to the creative industries here? You know, you mentioned a couple of folks working professionally after getting involved with the arts here at the Wallace. Have you seen that trajectory connect arts education to those creative industries?
We're making headway. We've got a long way to go. Our friends at Otis College of Art and Design commission a study every year on the scope and breadth of the creative economy in LA and even statewide. It's not just the entertainment industry, which we think of as a Hollywood thing. It's much broader than that. So furniture design, toy design, fashion design, architecture, that really stretch the boundary, that all of those are creative industries, and all of those fields will prosper when we're cultivating creativity among young people, not just creativity as a performer, but what about a sound engineer? What about an animator? What about somebody who designs video games, who does other coding in the digital world? Those jobs are there. What isn't yet there, we said earlier, is the diversity. There is not a reflection of the kids in school in those jobs. And so it's both ways. It's people in those companies and industries doing a better job to reach out. It's also schools doing a better job to understand why arts learning is so relevant. It's not just nice to do and fun to do, although those are really important in my mind. But there are jobs that we need to challenge the stigma or stereotype of the starving artist. Interestingly, among immigrant parents, there's a resistance to their child as an artist sometimes because their view is that we didn't fight so hard to come to this country. For you to become a starving artist, you need to get a real job. So all of us need to think more deeply and be better informed about the range of very vibrant, well-paid, well-supported jobs and career opportunities across the arts, not just the celebrity on stage, but all the fields that I mentioned. So this has become a priority through the LA County Arts Education Collective. It's a priority of our county board of supervisors to challenge the lack of diversity in these industries and to strengthen that pipeline of in-school learning, apprenticeships, paid internships, mentoring, coaching, so that the jobs reflect the diversity of the young people who deserve to have a seat at those tables.
That's great, and that's an awesome perspective from your role as an arts education leader, as an arts educator. So Mila, from your perspective as an emerging artist, do you see a path for you and your peers in this arts education, creative industries field?
I definitely know that all of my friends are involved in art in one way or another, and I know that a lot of them were met with resistance when they were applying for colleges and are like, I want to go to art school. I want to be able to immerse myself in what I love. But on the other side of that, there are the people who are so strongly encouraging the youth to go into the fields that they love, because we don't want to get stuck doing a job that we don't love. We don't want to live a life like that. We want to be able to combine what you're saying. There's so many more jobs than what people think of. Like my best friend is a painter, and she is very much so a traditional painter, like canvas. She hasn't really gotten into graphic design, but everybody keeps telling her to. And I know that she kind of met in the middle. Now she's doing screen printing. She's finding ways to use her passion and also think about how she can go into the future in a realistic sense. And I'm very, very proud of her for doing that, and proud of all of my friends for sticking to their passion. But I know that I specifically, when I had my first year at college already, and when I was there, the classes that I enjoyed the most were the ones that were focused on what I love. And I know that I'm going to follow my passions and hopefully, go to places that support those passions, because I don't really want to be anywhere else. I want to be where the heart is and where my heart is. So.
And my heart is in the, game design, toy design.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. If I weren't doing this job. So our last question, as we have just a few minutes left, to both of you, I guess what's next for this work in your mind? What do you see as our next step as a field, whether it's here in Los Angeles or nationwide, to be a voice for arts education?
You want to go first?
Okay. Great question. One, I don't know, is the short answer. One of the things that we're grappling with here in LA, because of the scope of it, is how do we engage all kids and not think of it as only an in-school strategy. Schools are vitally important, and I spoke earlier about the work that's going on in schools, so I don't want to dismiss that. But that can't be the whole game, and there are things that schools are great at, things that schools aren't so great at. And we know that kids walk to school and walk home from school with more technology and artistic potential on their cell phone, in many cases, than what they would experience during the school day. So how do we enlist technology as a partner to inspire and engage and empower young people? Met the other day with a group of people using virtual reality to link young people to the world of symphony orchestra by allowing them through VR to physically place themselves in the midst of an orchestra and understand the energy and excitement and thrill of that as a way of drawing interest to music. So yes, there should be high school band programs and orchestra programs, but apps on your phone and other ways to engage technology to reach kids and other ways to mobilize communities outside of schools to share resource and expertise. I think that's the next wave, so that arts education is seen as a holistic embrace of an entire community, including schools, but not just a school thing or a school problem or a school challenge, but a community-wide challenge and a community-wide potential. And I think when we open the doors to those conversations, there's so much energy and potential that come from a broader circle of stakeholders than just saying as why aren't the schools doing more. So that's something that we haven't figured out the solution, but we're thinking about in LA County. What are some new models? What's the equivalent of like Uber for arts education? The good part of Uber, I would say, or Lyft, that is disruptive of the constraints that we now have and a way to find connections to more and more and more kids. So I'm excited. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I think that's where the future is going. Embrace of the whole community, embrace of technology, and validating the learning that happens outside of school as part of the process.
Thank you.
Most of my experience has been within a classroom or within the classes that go on at Get Lit, which isn't necessarily a school, but still a creative center. And so I think that the future, what's next for me, is to continue to work with youth, because I am still youth, so I feel, I'm a little plugged in. But so I want to continue to write with people and listen to people. But also a thing that I learned this year that took me a long time to really discover within myself is that there's always this idea that I am really passionate about, being an advocate, but I'm equally passionate about being a poet. I want to sit and write about flowers, but I also want to write about being like a queer youth. So I think I learned that there's always this resistance where I say, like, I want to be a poet. It's like, okay, you want to change the world, like, what's writing a poem going to do? But that's a thing that I think is a stigma we need to dismantle, because if you look in history at the effects and the implications of artistic renaissances that have gone on and the way that they have changed the mindset of so many people, you hear a poem and it makes you feel something sometimes, and that can really change the way that you act or you behave. And so I think my work and my mission in life is to be like, you know what, you want to write a poem about flowers? That poem can change the world. It can make someone's day. It can save someone. It can create and ignite a passion within someone. So that's the work that I hope to do, and I'm very excited about it.
Well, thank you, and I think you're right, and words can make you feel a certain kind of way, and that I'm feeling very inspired from your words, both of you, so thank you so much. Can we hear it for our guests here? This brings us to a close in our time at this national kickoff for National Arts and Education Week. And so I thank you all for tuning in, and thank you all for being here in person in Los Angeles. Also, I would love to thank the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts for hosting us here today, Studio School for the videography that is happening behind the scenes, the entire team at Americans for the Arts, and all others across the nation that are leading efforts to advance arts education in their communities. For those who are celebrating New Year today, Happy New Year, and thank you all so much, and happy National Arts and Education Week.